Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Soumya Joseph, and I am the project leader of MyVow, Migrant Women Opportunities for Work, a project of New Communities Partnership, co-funded by the Government of Ireland and the European Social Fund under the Programme for Employability, Inclusion and Learning. MyVow, along with the scheme to support national organizations, another project of NCP funded by the Government of Ireland through POBL on behalf of the Department of Rural and Community Development and run by my colleague, organization session, Understanding Your Finances. But before we start, I just wanted to let you know that this session is being recorded so that we can make it available to people who are unable to join us today. And I would also like you to tell a bit more about MyVow. MyVow's aim is to explore, support, and overcome the specific barriers that migrant women are facing in Ireland during their job-seeking journeys. MyVow is designed to empower migrant women to reach their potential, rebuild their confidence, and upgrade their skills through a free 4-week application. We offer equality, diversity, and inclusion training to HR staffs, recruiters, and people involved in hiring processes of companies or organizations so that we can work together to overcome the barriers that migrant women face in accessing employment in Ireland. And we also offer information sessions like today's, where we cover topics of importance for migrants and their lives in Ireland. If you would like to know more about us and our programs, please contact MyVow at newcommunities.ie. I will leave this email address in the chat. Now we'll all speak about the scheme to support national organizations and their available services to migrants. Francesco?
Yeah, hello everybody. Can everybody hear me? Yeah? Okay, hi, my name is Francesco. I am the National Development and Integration Officer, and the project I coordinate is called the SSNO, which stands for Scheme to Support National Organizations. So the main aim of the project is to basically both, one end, to develop the overall network nationally and locally, and to increase basically outreach capacity, especially to hard to reach groups and individuals nationwide, but also on the other hand to provide direct support to our members group, so to our existing members, but also to new groups in terms of their capacity building and their group development. I also provide, together with my colleague Nasser, who coordinates the CCAP, which is Social Inclusion Community and Activation Program, we provide direct support, one-to-one support to mainly marginalized individuals. So we provide support in terms of access to social services, community services. We advocate on their behalf. And another major part of my role is to network. That's a very important part of my role, is to network with major stakeholders. So we link in with all the major migrant organizations in the country, but also with local authorities and with other local authorities departments like the homeless unit. We do a lot of work with the homeless unit. But then also my role is kind of central in terms of promoting NCP projects and services. In fact, I link in with all our projects in terms of promoting each project services. So that would be me.
Thank you, Francesco.
Thank you.
NCP has other projects and runs different services for migrants. So if you would like to learn more about them, please visit NCP's website, newcommunities.ie. Now, getting into today's business. The aim of today's session is for you to learn and be more informed about different aspects of finances, like financial well-being in Ireland in context to Irish society, debts, payrolls and taxes, the available national support, etc. We realize that despite the many efforts from different organizations, such as the ones that some of our guest speakers come from, there is still misinformation among migrants on how different systems work in the financial sector, how our taxes are calculated, and what are the different available supports we can count on, etc. And without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome and be joined by our three speakers. Gwen Harris, she's the Regional Manager for North Dublin MABS. Mary Waters, she's the Regional Manager for Citizens Information Services, North Dublin. And Amy, she's the Senior Researcher for TASC. Welcome, everyone. Now I'm going to pass it on to Gwen. Gwen has been very active in money management education, engaging with community groups on the delivery of skills-based money management programs for citizens. She is the regional manager for MABS, which is Money Advice and Budgeting Service. The Money Advice and Budgeting Service is a free and confidential service for people who are having problems with money management and debt. The floor is all yours, Gwen.
Thank you very much, Amy. Oh, sorry, not Amy. Sorry. Good morning. Now, just to share my screen. Apologies. Now, can I just check that my screen is visible and shared correctly at the moment? Can the panel see?
Yes.
Yes, great. Thank you. The session this morning is looking at financial well-being for people in general in Ireland. And this morning, what I'll be talking about is how to control and improve your financial well-being through budgeting. As mentioned, the Money Advice and Budgeting Service is also known as MABS, and we are located throughout Ireland. Myself and Mary represent the regions of North Dublin. However, we have respective colleagues in 8 regions in the country. In MABS, there are 65 offices in operation. The MABS service is free, confidential, independent, and non-judgmental. We provide advice and support to people currently in debt or in danger of falling into debt. MABS has a variety of ways people can access advice and support, either through our local offices. However, in COVID times, our offices did have to close to the public, but we were still accessible through our national helpline, through social media, and through our website. Our national helpline phone number is 0818 07 2000. What does MABS do on a practical level? I appreciate maybe some people may not be aware of MABS, and therefore sometimes it's hard to reach out and contact the service if you're not really sure what we do. We work on empowering people to regain control of their finances. We work on one-to-one with people through, as I mentioned, different channels, through our phone service, through our office in one-to-one services, and through our website in providing fact sheets and tools for people for budgeting. We also support people in practical budgeting and money management skills, in developing their skills so that day-to-day expenses can be met and debts can be repaid. We work on raising awareness of debt issues in the local communities by delivering money management education sessions in schools and in other community groups. Currently, we're working with Amy, who is also on the panel this morning, in a financial capacity programme run in North Dublin. We work to report on policy issues that impact consumers and communities in the area of debt and money management. This is a social policy remit that we have, and we gather information and stories of our clients to help show where some policy weaknesses may be. So what is a budget? This is the focus for this morning. Budgeting and financial planning are recognised as key to financial well-being. What is financial well-being? It's a great buzzword, but what does it mean? It is really about having the confidence to manage your money and to plan for your future, and to be as prepared as possible for the unexpected. It is recognised that we cannot be prepared for everything, but there are some that we can have small savings for that help us cope with unexpected events. So what is a budget? A budget is a plan of your financial situation. It is important as it will help you see what money is coming into your household, how much money is going out of your household, where it's going, and how much you can afford to offer those you owe money to or your creditors. But it will also help you to best plan for spending in your future and maybe for some savings. One of the most difficult aspects when you're doing your own budget is what is a need and what is a want. When we think about our budget, people think of a budget as being really tight, restricting our spendings, no luxuries. However, while yes, we must first plan to pay our essentials such as food, rent, light, heat, education and medical costs, we also must ensure that our budget has some expenses for social outgoings to mind our mental health, but also to help us sustain the budget. A budget that is too tight or too unrealistic, we may not continue to be able to live within it for a long period of time. And a budget that's too tight will not help financial well-being, as it will become too restrictive. So planning your budget, maybe for a takeaway meal or perhaps for a special day out, or indeed for a nice holiday, they're the goals that we would look to plan for and work towards. But the size of the goal is for you to decide, but also within your own means. So to help you do your budget, MABS has a number of tools. And what we have, you can see here on screen, is we have a budget sheet that you can write down if maybe you're not good with computers or you're not good on apps on phones. You can do it on a budget sheet, or you could do it on a piece of paper in a copybook and just write down what is coming into your house and what is going out. What are you spending your money on? My colleague Mary, who'll be talking after me, will be talking to you this morning about some suggestions and tips about tax, the tax system, very confusing. But also Mary is working with the Citizens Information Service, and the Citizens Information Service can help you maximize your income to see if there are other maybe social welfare or tax entitlements that you could apply for that will help increase your household income. You can access this budget sheet by calling our offices. Any of our offices you can find on the website, or you can access it through our helpline, the number at the bottom of the screen. Also on our website, there are some interactive budgeting tools. If you're good with computers, you could log on, you could put in and design your budget, draft it, put your information on so that you can see where you are with the money coming in and the money going out. We also have an app which is available in the App Store and in iTunes, a MABS budgeting app that allows you to store and update on your phone different expenses as you spend. Tracking your spending. In a time of contactless payments, excuse me, I couldn't think of the word, tapping our card, we very rarely have cash. A lot of the times it's either with a PIN or even no PIN, tapping with our cards, and find it very difficult to track our spending sometimes. I'm sure we've all looked at our bank account and thought, oh, I don't remember spending that. So tracking our spending is one of the important things in preparing your budget. Spending diaries. So MABS have a spending diary, which is a small little diary, little log on a weekly basis that you can help to track your spending by writing down all your expenses, and sometimes including expenses for children's pocket money, €2 for an ice cream, all these little expenses that add up. So keeping track is really important and helps you to see maybe where you can make savings, but also where you need to spend money, such as bills, rent, food, light, heat. One idea when you're doing your budget is that maybe you sit in each room in your house and write down the costs you can think of that are associated with that room. Sometimes we might forget about a service for a boiler or the TV license. Expenses that don't come up every week, we can sometimes forget to plan for. You can track your spending by using your bank statements or apps. Some of our banks have now provided a budgeting aspect to their app where you can assign your expenses to a category. You can assign it to social, bills, payment to friends in your app. You can use, one of the things that you might use as well is using your bank statements. Just having a look, writing down, going back to see where's the money spent, what bills have to be paid, and what bills maybe we could look to address and reduce. So it's important when we're planning our budget to look at planning for the year ahead. We can all think of times that have particular expenses such as Christmas and back to school time. I think a lot of children are back to school today or this week, and anybody who has had to pay for those uniforms, books, all associated costs with schools will know that it's something you definitely need to plan for. So this is why when we're looking at our budget, we need to look at from January to December for our plan, and that will help us include the increased cost maybe during summer for extra childcare or summer camps, but also for Christmas, back to school costs, and such as the TV license, a bill that we can easily forget because it's only once a year. TV license, you can look to control by paying it once a month, but if you choose not to pay it by direct debit once a month, you need to plan to save €160 at the time that it's due, which can be a big shock if it's not planned for. We can make savings in our budget, and some places we can make savings we might not think of. So what might we be able to control? We're using our light and heat. We just take for granted sometimes these bills. So we could shop around, see if we could get a cheaper provider. I'll discuss that in a minute, but also small energy saving tips, such as now coming into the winter, closing the doors and the windows, maybe closing the curtains in the evening, using energy saving light bulbs and other energy measures. You can get some tips on energy saving on seai.ie. Just beware when you're shopping, food shopping. There's a phrase, a bargain is only a bargain if you really need it. Shops are designed to big, bright, attractive signs of buy one, get one free. Really, it's important that we see, do we need this? Are we buying a bargain because we think we need it? And then maybe sometimes food goes to waste. We can very often go to the supermarket and shop unconsciously, where we just shop by habit. And it's important, even though we do shopping every week, to write a list, see what's in the house, and only get what we need. With the phone and internet, you can shop around for best deals. I'll discuss that again in a second. And the same with your car insurance. And if you pay by the month, it's just to be careful and know what extra charges you might be charged for. With your bins, your waste collection, each council area, and I'm conscious that not everybody would be in Dublin, but every council area has different charges, but the recycled bins, or generally a green bin, is a cheaper collection, and therefore if we can recycle more, we are not only being climate change friendly, but also helping to reduce our costs for our waste collection. water charges for anybody who is living outside of Dublin, who might be on a group water scheme, monitoring or being green, being careful with your water usage will help you control your water bills. Discussed earlier the payment of the TV license by direct debit. If you do wish to manage your TV license this way, you can contact An Post. The details will be on your TV license that you receive in the post. With house insurance, it's important to shop around for the best deals. And with car tax, if we pay by 3 or 6 months rather than 12 months, there is extra charges applied depending on the size of your car. This would be one of the expenses that we could plan for annually. Bank charges. This is something that sometimes we forget might be something that we could control, but our banks are charging either by transaction. So every time you use your card in the cash machine or in a point of sale, when you put in your PIN, you're charged for a transaction. And some banks, they charge you the same charge every quarter or every month, irrelevant of how often you use your card. So it's important to control your bank charges. You must know how you're charged first, and then decide which bank is the best bank for you in how you want to live, either with cash or maybe that you use your card all the time. Christmas, birthdays, and other special occasions can be very expensive. So I think that a lot of people would welcome other people asking, can we make an arrangement about a Christkindle for our kids and in your families, so that, and in your close circle of friends, because that can be a very expensive pressure that everybody feels, but secretly, maybe everybody hopes that somebody else would say, well, let's not buy, let's do a Christkindle. One of the important things that you can help your children is understanding the cost of living. And this might be by giving them a small pocket money or wage that they can live on to help them to start learning how to budget. You can shop around for utility bills, gas and electricity. There are a number of websites that will help you compare prices for gas, electricity, mobile phones, internet and broadband. These might be bonkers.ie, switcher.ie, powertoswitch.ie, and each of those websites will help you determine what is the best quote or the best provider for your family. We can also shop around for, this is the, sorry, I did mention the electricity, and comparison websites will help you decide which of the providers in this picture would be best for you. And we can shop around for TV, internet services, broadband and telephone. And there's a number of services that you could avail of. As I mentioned, we can shop around for our bank charges and bank accounts. And the ccpc.ie is a great resource and will help you understand bank charges, but it'll also help you decide which bank might give you the best value. Very briefly, because I'm very conscious of time, there are a number of ways that you can pay your bills, such as your rent, light, heat. You can pay by cash. And when you're paying by cash, it is important to know that some services or some shops may apply a surcharge for paying in cash. By direct debit, if you work in a bank account, all providers will offer a direct debit. And with utilities, they would offer what's called a level pay, which means that you pay the same amount of gas and electricity over 12 months. So no shock bills in the winter. You can pay by phone if you call the companies, and they will accept payments by debit card. And then there's a household budget deduction. If anybody is in receipt of a social welfare payment, you can pay up to 25% of your social welfare payment directly to your creditors. Prepayment meters are a great way for some people to manage and control their electricity usage. Some useful websites to leave you with. MABS.ie, as I mentioned, lots of budgeting tools and information and contact details for all our services. The consumerhelp.ie, which is a website that enables you to, you can look and compare the all financial products, all regulated bank products, loans, current accounts, insurance. Citizensinformation.ie, creditunion.ie, if you're looking to borrow a realistic and affordable amount. Just some brief other websites that would be good for you to maybe check in and see if you can get a better value for your providers of suppliers of utilities and of insurance and financial products. You can contact our services in a number of ways during the current restrictions. We are moving to open up, as you may know from the news, more in the next 6 weeks. However, if we cannot meet you face to face, or if you cannot travel to us face to face, we can be contacted through mabs.ie or at our national helpline. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gwen, for that information session.
Sorry.
Yeah. We remind you that if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box to send them, and we will answer all your questions after our speakers have completed. Our next speaker is Mary Waters. Mary is an experienced manager of the information, advice, and advocacy services provided by the Citizens Information Services. A graduate of Trinity College Dublin, Mary has worked for over 20 years in the community and voluntary sector. Prior to that, Mary worked with the Revenue Commissioners in Customs and Excise and with the Department of Tourism, Sport and Recreation. Over to you, Mary.
Thanks, Sumya. I'm not sure my presentation is going to cooperate just right now. So we might just take one small minute to get it sorted. Okay, can you all see my presentation?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you very much, Sumya and MyWow and the New Communities Partnership for inviting me to be part of this webinar this morning, along with my colleague from our sister organisation, MABS, Gwen, who you've just heard from, and Amy from TASC. Talking about our financial well-being and taxes is perhaps not the most exciting topic, but it's certainly very important. Today, I'm going to look at just one aspect in relation to taxes. As Gwen said, we deal with a wide range of topics, and I will signpost where you can get further information. It's very important in this digital age that people are getting information from trusted sources. For information you can trust, we'd advise you to come to ourselves or MABS or other organisations that are, I suppose, have good reputations and are giving good information. So what are we? Like MABS, we're a free and confidential service. We offer information, advice, and advocacy. So we will give you basic information on a broad range of topics, such as health, social welfare, employment, education, consumer issues, moving country, and tax. We'll advise you of your options. So for example, if you're working with MABS around managing your finances, we can advise you what social welfare payments you might be entitled to and assist you in filling out forms and looking at the different criteria. We also do advocacy, which is where we will represent you, perhaps to social welfare, about a payment you have been refused. Perhaps it's about an employment issue where you're having issues with your employer in relation to For example, your pay or your entitlements. You can contact us in many ways. We have 260 offices nationwide. We have our website, which generates millions of hits every year and also has information available in a variety of languages. And our national phone service, which is called the Citizens Information Phone Service, or CIPS, and the contact number for that is 0818 07 4000. And this is a good time to mention that our phone numbers are all changing from 0761s to 0818s. And by the 1st of January, all our contact numbers will start with 0818. So tax, a very exciting topic, can be very complicated. There are two things in life that are certain, and they are debt and taxes. In Ireland, taxes are levied by the revenue commissioners. Because our first official language is Irish, you will sometimes see them referred to as the commissionary uncum. On their letterheads and so on, it will always have the Irish version. So the objectives today, and I just want to thank Lisa and Ray, who are doing sign language. It's sometimes difficult to keep up with the speed of the presentation. So if you need me to slow down, don't be afraid to ask. So the objectives today are that I will outline information about PPS numbers. I'll talk briefly around types of taxes, around income taxes, tax credit certificates, universal social charge, PRSI, how tax is calculated, and payroll and taxes. So dealing with the revenue commissioners. Here in Ireland, the revenue commissioners are the body you deal with in relation to taxes. As Sumia said, in the past, I worked with the revenue commissioners, but I would be the first to say that it can be difficult sometimes to negotiate the bureaucracy or the level of paperwork that's required. The first thing you need to manage your taxes is a PPS number or a public services number, personal public services number. The easiest way to manage your taxes is by setting up a My Account with Revenue. Then you can manage your taxes online. Years ago, the challenge was paperwork. Now the challenge might be the amount of online accounts that you need to have for different things. Through My Account, you can manage all of your tax information, and it works very effectively in enabling you to access it in an up-to-date and timely fashion. PPS numbers, or personal public service numbers, are extremely important, and it's a unique reference number that helps you access social welfare benefits, public services, and information in Ireland. You must have a PPS number to deal with revenue. However, as some of you may well have found out when you came to Ireland, it can be a challenge to get a PPS number. You must show that you need one for a transaction with a specified body. For example, you need one to register with revenue. Some people tell us that when they apply for jobs, they are asked for a PPS number. But your employer or a prospective employer has no right to ask for a PPS number when you apply, only when you are taking up employment. And if you say your reason for looking for PPS number is looking for work, it's sometimes refused. The reason should be, I'm taking up work. The format of a PPS number is always the same in Ireland. It's 7 digits followed by 1 or 2 letters. How do you apply for a PPS number? And I know Sumya is going to circulate these presentations afterwards, so they will be here for those who need it. The easiest way is mywelfare.ie, another online account with the Department of Social Protection. However, to access mywelfare.ie, you need a basic MyGov ID account, another online account. Citizens Information can assist you with setting up Revenue My accounts, Social Welfare My Welfare accounts, and MyGov ID accounts. To get a PPS number, you need to have a photo identity document, evidence of why you need a PPS number. For example, I am taking up a job, and proof of your address. You can also apply for face-to-face appointments to get a PPS number in your local intro office. Most of those are currently suspended during COVID, but are starting to come back. Types of taxes. So there's loads of different types of taxes. There's income tax. There's income tax credits and reliefs. There's tax credits and reliefs for people with disabilities. There's capital taxes. And under this heading, we'd also talk about inheritance taxes. There's duties and VAT or value added tax. There's tax on savings and investments, including dirt tax. There's information about moving country and taxation. There's motor tax, which those of you who have cars will be fully aware of. There's carbon tax. There's housing taxes and reliefs. There's a tax appeals commission who you can go to if you're not happy about tax levied. And there's tax clearance certificates, which are important for self-employed people in terms of proving they're compliant with the relevant tax requirements. Income tax. So nearly all income is liable to income tax. And today I'm going to focus on employed rather than self-employed. The main types of tax are pay-as-you-earn, or PAYE. It's important to be aware of income tax reliefs, which Gwen mentioned earlier. And we will work with you to see if there are other income tax reliefs that you may be entitled to that you are not claiming. There's a universal social charge, and there's PRSI or pay-related social insurance. And your PRSI is incredibly important in terms of looking at your entitlement to social welfare benefits, that income maximisation that Gwen mentioned. So what is pay-as-you-earn? Tax on income that you earned from employment is deducted from your wages by your employer on behalf of revenue. This is known as pay-as-you-earn. The amount of tax you have to pay depends on the amount of income you earn and on your personal circumstances. Are you married? Are you single? Have you dependents? There are a range of income tax reliefs available that can reduce the amount of tax that you pay. For example, if you have medical expenses, you may be able to claim them against your tax. There are tax reliefs for older people's tax credits. There's tax reliefs in relation to separation, divorce, and there's income tax credits and reliefs. There's information about maintenance and tax where you're paying maintenance to a spouse or children. There's income tax credits and reliefs following a death. There are employment tax credits and reliefs, single person child carer credits. And the list goes on. There's housing tax credits. There's tax relief for third level fees, which people often miss. There's deeds of covenants, home carer tax credits, the bike to work scheme, starting your own business, and working from home tax reliefs. So I don't intend to explain all of those, but just to say there is a wide range of tax reliefs which may help you reduce your tax bill, and we can work with you in relation to that if you have any queries. Universal social charge is a tax on income that came in the 1st of January 2011. You pay universal social charge if your gross income is more than €13,000 per year. You don't pay USC if your income is less than 13,000. However, once your income goes over 13,000, you pay universal social charge on all of your income from zero up. This is just an example of what the rates are. So again, the presentation will be circulated, and it just shows that for up to €12,012, the rate is 0.5%. And then if your income is over 70,000, the rate is 8%. And just to say that there's a reduction on universal social charge for medical card holders. So it's always important to tell your employer if you have a medical card, you may be required to produce it, as this will reduce your liability for universal social charge. PRSI then, and this is really, really important. Some people work in jobs that we would call cash in hand, where perhaps they are not registered with revenue and are not paying taxes. That also means they are not paying PRSI. And should you lose your job or be in any financial difficulty, your PRSI contributions are very important in terms of your social welfare entitlements. There are 3 types of social welfare payments. Benefits, which are based on the social insurance you have paid. Allowances, which are means tested on the amount of money you have. And universal payments, such as child benefit. So social insurance, to a lot of older Irish people, will be known as your stamp. You pay this when you're in insurable employment. And your PRSI contributions entitle you to a wide range of social welfare payments without a means test. There are obviously criteria to all of these payments. So for example, job seekers benefit. If you lose your job and you have enough PRSI contributions, you will get a payment for 9 months, regardless of how much money you have in the bank. But if you don't have PRSI payments made to a certain level, you will be means tested, as in they will look at how much money you have to determine what payments, if any, you will receive. Other payments include illness benefit, maternity benefit, paternity benefit, health and safety benefit, invalidity pension, important for those left behind, widowers or surviving civil partners pension on a contributory basis. Guardians payments on a contributory basis, that means you have contributed your PRSI stamps to entitle you to this benefit. The contributory state pension and treatment benefit. So the fun bit, Irish payroll and taxes. Every employee receives a tax credit certificate, which you can see on your My account with revenue. It's a document which declares which tax credits are being used to reduce the amount of tax you have to pay. And it shows if you're currently liable or exempt from the universal social charge. It's issued by revenue. When you start a new job, you should register your new job in My account, and revenue will tell your employer your tax credits, which your employer then applies to your pay. Tax credits reduce the tax you owe. How is tax calculated? So revenue send an RPN or a revenue payroll notification to your employer. Your tax is generally cumulative. That means that it rolls forward from the 1st of January each year. So for example, if you earn less one week, you may get a tax refund the next week. In some cases, it might be on a week one basis. That means it's not cumulative and it's calculated on the pay you get in that pay period. You will not get a refund of tax that's due if, for example, you have a week where you earn less. And the reasons for week one are often because you started a new job mid-year and the history in terms of what you've earned to date is not immediately available. Sometimes people don't want their new employer to know what they've earned previously, and that might also be a reason for week one. Linking in with what Gwen had said in terms of managing your money, sometimes people are on emergency tax and they pay high levels of tax until they have registered with revenue and received tax clearance certificate. It's very important to regularize your tax as soon as possible. And if you have paid emergency tax, you may be entitled to a refund. So the standard rate cutoff points, and just for 2021, you can ignore 2019 and 2020 there. A single person pays tax at 20% up to €35,300, and they pay 40% on the balance. When you're calculating your tax, you look at your gross pay and you deduct non-taxable items first, such as pension contributions. Then you use the standard rate cutoff points, and then you deduct the tax credits that apply. So this is incredibly complicated. I'm going to give you an example. So Joan is single and earns $28,000 a year. She gets her notice from revenue around her tax credits. And she's told she has a single person tax credit of €1,650 and an employee or PAYE credit of also €1,650. So Joan has a total tax credit of €3,300. As we said in a previous slide, the standard rate cutoff point is $35,300. So because Joan earns less than that, she will only pay 20% tax. So we take her gross pay and we multiply it by 20%. Therefore, Joan is liable for a tax bill of €5,600 per year. However, that tax liability can be reduced by her tax credits. So 5,600 of a tax liability reduced by her tax credits of €3,300 gives her a tax bill now of €2,300 per annum. She also has to pay universal social charge. And her universal social charge, it shows there how it's calculated. I'm not going to go through all the details. It is outlined there. So then it shows the total amount that's deducted is her income tax and her USC. And then obviously that's spread over whatever your pay period is, whether you're paid on a weekly, a fortnightly, or a monthly basis. So nearly there. Your pay slip is a very important part of the payroll system in Ireland. And it's enshrined or written in legislation that you have a right to a pay slip. And there's fines for employers of up to €2,000 for failing to provide a payslip. Your payslip is divided into different sections, and it must include, first of all, it must include who your employer is and their registered number. And that's really important because oftentimes people say, I don't actually know who my employer is. I know who my manager is, but I don't know who my employer is. That's on your payslip. It includes your gross pay, any deductions from your pay, any additions to your pay, such as bank holiday pay, overtime, etc. It generally will also include your own personal information, such as your name and PPS number. As I said, your employer's name and registration number, the pay period, for example, month 6, a summary of your pay and deductions so far for this year, and your tax credits and cutoff points. When you go to MABS, if you're dealing with them, they will often ask for pay slips to see how much money you're getting. When you're doing a budget, your pay slip is a good reference document. And when you're applying to the Department of Social Protection for many payments, including the working family payment, pay slips are an essential document. So in summary, I've gone through information about your PPS number and how you can apply. We've talked about types of taxes, income taxes, tax credit certificates, the universal social charge, pay-related social insurance and how it entitles you to social welfare payments, how tax is calculated, and payroll and taxes. So thank you all very much, and thanks again to Lisa and to Ray for signing, and I'll hand you back to Sumia.
Thank you so much, Mary. I am delighted to now pass the floor to Amy. Amy leads TASC's social inclusion research stream and manages projects that investigate the ways public services and institutions in Ireland can better serve the needs of socially, economically, and culturally excluded persons and groups. Thank you so much, Amy, and over to you now.
Thanks very much. Delighted to be here. And let me just make sure my screen is up. Oh, hold on one second. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, thanks very much. It's a tough act to follow in terms of taxes, talking about something equally, I'd say, well, similarly, not always very fun, but very important. And that is personal debt. So that's what I've been asked to speak on today. And as Sumia said, I do work for a think tank. We're called TASC, Think Tank for Action on Social Change. And for the past year or so, we've been working with MABS and a local community organization called Northside Partnership to design and deliver a financial well-being training with adults in North Dublin. And so part of my presentation today is based on that material that we've been discussing with families and households. So if you are interested, and if you are living in one of the areas which we are currently working, the information for the training is at the very end of my presentation, so you can take note of that and and get in touch with one of my colleagues. So that's to get us started. And so what I will be discussing, and thanks very much to Gwen and Mary for kind of setting this up quite seamlessly. I do have a little bit of overlap in some of my slides with the topics that Gwen covered, but I think that's okay. So what I've been asked to discuss is debt, right? Oftentimes, I think debt provokes a very negative feeling, but it's important to remember that debt is just very normal and very much part of our society here in Ireland. I'll be breaking that down a bit more throughout the presentation. So we'll start by just providing some definitions of debt. In particular, we're looking at personal debt. So debt that's incurred by households themselves, by us, as well as other, similar financial commitments. I'll also be discussing this term called interest. So the cost of borrowing, as we know, when you borrow money or borrow for to pay off a certain good or service, you oftentimes, or all the time, have to pay back more than what you borrowed. So that difference is known as interest. So we'll be looking at that a bit more closely as well. And just important always to keep in mind that debt is normal, but in those circumstances when problem debt occurs, or when you're really struggling to pay back your debt servicing, your agreements, that's when you might need additional help and support. But just to know that there are services and supports there, as been mentioned already as well. So I'll be listing those. Most importantly and prominently is MABS, right? And then also kind of breaking down some online resources for you at the very end that might help. Great, thank you for that. Okay, to start. So what is debt? At its core, debt is simply a financial commitment. So as Gwen was saying, when you're talking about your plan or your budgeting or your strategy, it's important to just remember that your debt repayments, if you have borrowed money, just to factor those into your plan, right? It's just another financial commitment. I think it is really easy to get caught up in thinking, oh, debt is, this is a bad thing. Absolutely not. It is our right as consumers, as members of society, to have access to loans and sources of credit when we need it, right? It's a very important right that we have. And debt is very common in the Irish context. So at the moment, I believe Irish households are the 5th most indebted household in Europe. And you have about half of everyone in Ireland who lives in Ireland having some sort of debt. So very normal, right? But there's lots of different types of debt. And today, like I said, looking specifically at personal debt. And there's lots of terms used sometimes, so it's easy to get a little confused in them, but hopefully I can break them down. So the first is consumer debt, right? So the debt that we use to borrow for consumer goods and services. You also have non-mortgage debt. So every other source of debt someone might have outside of a mortgage, which is really a really big, prominent source of debt for a lot of people. And then you have secure versus insecure debt. So secure debt is that debt more closely, debt incurred with an asset involved, like a house, like a mortgage, where insecure debt is not, right? More like personal loans or moneylender loans. So debt that you might take out without an asset or a good associated with it. So those terms oftentimes overlap with one another. For those of us who do work in this area, one of the distinctions we like to make sometimes is happy debt versus crappy debt. Now it's an oversimplification, but just to keep in mind that happy debt contributes to your overall wealth and financial well-being in the long term. So, mortgage debt in most circumstances could be considered happy debt, while crappy debt does not, right? Does not have that same ability to contribute to your wealth. There are, of course, many circumstances where you might need to borrow or take out crappy debt. So don't get too hung up about that. That's very common here as well. But the most important thing to remember when you're breaking down the difference between types of debt is that happy debt has that potential to add to your future wealth and financial security. Move on to the next slide now. So the cost of borrowing. So like I said, whenever you borrow, you always need to pay back what you borrowed, but also a bit more, right? And that amount more will depend on a number of things. So you have interest, for example, which is the percentage of the amount borrowed. And that usually, as implied by the definition, is given as a percentage or as a range. APR is the annual percentage rate, which is the total cost of the loan. So sometimes these terms are used interchangeably, so it's good to interest, plus any additional fees for the cost of a loan. Oops, sorry, my internet is hopefully back now. Okay. And getting into debt is very easy, right? Particularly if you're taking out a loan that has a higher interest rate. So the easier a loan is to obtain from any provider or financial institution, it's usually a more expensive loan, right? So it would have a higher interest rate, higher APR, higher charges associated with that. And I'll break down some examples later on. And the amount of interest or APR you're charged in some circumstances will depend on a number of factors. So it will depend on your credit history, which I'll discuss in a later slide as well as how the bank or the institution deems you as a liability in terms of paying back that loan. So they'll take on board your own personal circumstance, right? How much money you have, and see, assign a rate according to a number of things. So just to keep that in mind, that in order, when you do borrow, you always need to pay back a bit more than what you originally borrowed. And when you're looking at different loans, to compare the cost of those loans, to compare the interest rates, and to compare the annual percentage rates as well, because that is how you'll know the total cost of what that loan will be for you to pay back over a certain period of time. So where can you borrow in Ireland? So the most common place for lots of people are their friends and their family members. It's pretty normal. But there are lots of other places as well if you want to borrow from, of course, major institutions. So banks and financial institutions. So some examples of the types of loans that they could provide. So you have personal loans and mortgages. You also have credit cards, which is a form, of course, of credit. And you have overdraft. There's also An Post, which is the Irish Postal Service. And that's increasingly providing more and more financial goods and products in recent years. So their website actually is very clear in sort of providing a breakdown of the types of loans that they provide and their various rates. There's also credit unions, which are available in your local area. And depending on your circumstance, you might be eligible for what is known as a It Makes Sense or personal microcredit loan. So this is uniquely from credit unions that offer this service. So it's important to check with your local credit union to see if they offer the It Makes Sense loan. But it is a low-cost loan for a very small amount, I believe up to 2,000 euros, at a very low interest rate, about 12.5%, that's offered specifically to people in receipt of social welfare payments. So if you are someone in receipt of social benefits, you might qualify for this loan. So it's good to look into that in your local area. There also, quite commonly here in Ireland, are moneylender or payday lender providers. You might have heard of some of these. Marble Trust is an example, Amigo loans, R&P credit, depending on your area. Some money lenders do come door to door, so you might have already seen them in your neighborhood. Others operate online. It's important to remember with money lenders that because of the types of loans that they provide, oftentimes their interest rates are much higher, so they're a much more expensive loan than major financial institutions and credit unions. So it's good to keep or get on board, or to understand the costs of the loan. And also, if you are borrowing from a money lender, which we know that many people do, and it's completely understandable because it's for lots of people their primary source or access to credit, to a loan, make sure that the money lender is registered with the central bank. So they are not what's known as an informal or illegal money lender. This is something that MABS recommends as well, because when, for example, if you do get into trouble repaying a loan and you need to seek additional help, there are more resources available to support, registered money lenders. It's very difficult, of course, to support people in trouble with, loan sharks or informal lenders, those that are not registered with the central bank. It's also an illegal form of lending. So just to be wary of that, because it can be tricky. There's also hire purchase agreements. So this has become in recent years a increasingly prominent feature within kind of major companies, and appliances are a big one, for example, in Ireland, who sell bigger goods. Oftentimes you can buy a good, but not pay the full amount when you're purchasing it. You pay, over a certain period of time. Just to remember, with hire purchase agreements, you don't actually own the product until you've paid off the entirety of the loan. It's a little bit tricky, especially because personal contract plans, or a form of hire purchase agreements, are very common with car purchases nowadays. And you're still deemed the owner of the car for insurance purposes, but not technically over time, because you haven't paid until you've paid off the entirety of that loan. So it's important to remember that with any form of hire purchase agreements. They're increasingly common. You'll see advertisements that say things like buy now, pay later. Just be very wary of those, because if something happens, you're not able to make a future payment. There could be very, very high fees or charges incurred with any of those. So just to keep that in mind. Okay. So the next one here. So just want to touch on briefly this concept of credit history. So your credit history is any information on any loans you have that are over 500 euros. And they are stored in one of two central databases. When a lender is deciding whether or not to loan to you, they will access your credit history in order to see, one, if you have any outstanding amounts owed on any of your current loans or debt repayments. Two, if you've ever missed a payment or had difficulty with payments in the past. And they will decide whether or not to lend to you based on those terms. So it is a very important, database, right? Your credit history. There are two bodies that store credit histories in Ireland. You have the Central Credit Register, which is the one I have here on the slide, which is, I'd say, it's a newer body, but it's more prominent because it is operated by the Central Bank of Ireland. You also might come across an entity known as the ICB, or the Irish Credit Bureau. This is an older institution. It's put together by major the banks. It's not as comprehensive, to the best of my knowledge, as the Central Credit Register. So that would be your, I would say, first port of call if you're looking to find out more information on your credit history. And it is free for people to get a copy of their own credit history. So this database stores all information on loans you have, from mortgages, credit cards, overdrafts, in addition to hire purchase agreements that was newly included within the last couple of years, being stored on the Central Credit Register. So banks, credit unions, and any other lenders are required by law to send this information future lenders can access. Citizens Information has a great website that provides lots of information, but further breaks down your credit history if you have some questions on that. And I include the link on the slides here. So if you wanted to, when you receive a copy of these slides, if you want to go in, access that information, I strongly recommend it. There's also a link here to the Central Credit Register itself. So if you have any additional questions on any of that. Okay, just moving on now to this slide here, talking a little bit about this issue of problem debt or over indebtedness. So as I said in the beginning, debt is very normal. It's very, very common here in Ireland to have some form of debt. It's when that debt becomes out of control, right? That's when that is not normal. And that's when you might need additional help or support. So problem debt is known as when people cannot make their debt repayments consistently on a regular basis when they fall due. And this can sometimes have knock-on effects and make it very difficult for people to pay their everyday bills and expenses, like Gwen was speaking on, all of those items that we must pay, right, in order to live and take part here. And when that happens, sometimes people can borrow more, right, to pay off additional debt. They might borrow from very expensive lenders that have incredibly high interest rates compared to those with lower cost interest rates. And then it can lead to what's known as a debt trap or a treadmill. See my little picture, where people are just in a cycle of paying debt over and over again. And it can be very difficult to break out of that cycle. So it's important when you are borrowing that you know what the monthly repayment is required of you, and that this monthly repayment is something that you can afford to pay back. Because when debt falls into a bit of a cycle or a bit of a trap, it can be difficult for people to see, the wood from the trees, and can be very stressful emotionally and mentally, especially because it would lead to them, having difficulty to pay back those other essential bills and essential living costs. And as you may know, in Ireland, the cost of living here is quite high, right? It's a very expensive country for things like housing, for example. So this can be very difficult and very challenging for people, so just to keep that in mind. There was a study that was done recently in the UK that said that when people that were over indebted, only about on average 11% of those people sought help or additional supports. So now that was in the UK, but I would estimate something similar happens here in Ireland. So it is very important to note that if you do get into difficulty when it comes to your debts or any sort of financial issues, there are great resources here. And the first and foremost is MABS. So the Money Advice and Budgeting Service. So as Gwen said already, she listed out all the services and supports that they provide. They are free, confidential. Their money advisors are non-judgmental. They have offices in every county. So there is one in your area in all likelihood. And they support people working through all different types of debt, right? Not just one type of debt, not just mortgage debt, but all types of debt, which is great. You also have a recently established body that I won't talk too much about, but I'll just touch on here, known as the Insolvency Services of Ireland, or the ISI. So isi.gov, I believe, is their website. And they have a full list of the services that they provide. The ISI specifically to help people who are in problem debt find a path or a solution towards insolvency or having that debt absolved for the most part, right? It was established in 2013, and they offer 4 different types of debt solutions. I won't provide a lot of information on those because they're quite technical, but my advice would be to anybody who thinks that they might be eligible for one of these solutions to start working with MABS. So go to MABS first, and MABS can then refer you on to what's known as a personal insolvency practitioner, or a PIP, and to help you navigate the ISI's services or the debt solutions. MABS also handle what is known as the DRN, which is an example of one of these debt solutions. They handle that in-house with their approved intermediaries. Again, the MABS service is very well positioned and well equipped to help you navigate that system. So if you do think you could be eligible for debt solutions, they're great. Start with MABS, and MABS will lead you on from there. So I just wanted to provide this slide here just to give, I think, a nice example of the types of debts that people have contacted MABS for. This was back in 2019, but I think it's still quite relevant pre-pandemic, right? These are for new MABS clients. So you have personal loans with financial institutions, and it also shows you the numbers of people. So you can see that lots and lots of people in Ireland access MABS services, right? So you have personal loans with financial institutions, utilities payments. So if you're struggling making your utility bills, or if you've fallen into what's known as arrears or behind on utility payments, credit cards, so you have your mortgages, hire purchase loans, money lenders, overdrafts, rent. Now this could be rent with the local authority if you're in social housing, or rent with a private landlord if you live in private accommodation, catalogs, fines from things like tolls, subprime, and waste charges, right? So very, very common. Lots of different types of debts, more than just one type. So if you are in a position where you might need additional supports, MABS helps people navigate all of these systems. So I also had this quick slide here, which overlaps a lot with what some of the supports that Gwen outlined in her presentation. So I won't touch upon it too much. The first is the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, or the CCPC, which is a body that provides lots of different information and support for people living in Ireland in terms of understanding their rights and the different services that are available. For example, this website has a huge section dedicated to the impact of Brexit on postal service fees here in Ireland. So as you know, when the UK officially exited Europe earlier this year, it had quite a large knock-on effect for Irish consumers who lots of times, particularly in buying online goods and services, were using UK retailers and outlets. So there's increased fees, increased VAT, right? Value-added taxes, which Mary covered, to all of those services now. So the CCPC, just one example, they have what's known as a Brexit hub, where they give you the breakdown of all the ways that Brexit has impacted or may have impacted Irish consumers. They also have a variety of money tools. They have a budget tracker, which is very easy and handy to use. If you're someone like me who very much struggles with math and likes to have everything laid out, the budget tracker is there. They also have some cost comparisons as well for different financial services. And for example, banking charges and personal accounts. If you're looking to compare the price of different loans, you can find some of that information on the CCPC, the ones that are offered from major financial institutions. You also have cost comparison websites for various utilities. So I won't talk about these too much because Gwen touched upon them quite well. But these two, bonkers.ie and switcher.ie, are both accredited with the Commission for the Regulation on Utilities, or CRU. So they provide unbiased and great information to help people, set up their homes and ensure that they are getting the best value or best cost for their utility bills. You also, of course, have citizens information, which is great for any general information. And in particular, what I've found in the past myself very useful about accessing their online services is they have checklists for benefits. So if you're in a certain situation, whether you're a carer or you're a person with disabilities, they have really clear laid out checklists that outline all of the entitlements or benefits you might be entitled to. So it's very clear information. And as Mary was saying, it is very increasingly important in our day and age to know where to go to find that unbiased, accurate information, right? So citizens information is one example of that. And you also have the MABS website as well. So they have their money tools, they have their own budget tracker, which is very easy to use. So it might be an additional support for you to use. And then I think that's the end of my presentation. I just have this final slide here, as I said in the beginning, tell you a little bit about this program that I've been working on with Gwen, actually. She's been associated with this as well from MABS. Money Made Sense. So we've been delivering group trainings with adults in North Dublin, as well as providing them with one-on-one financial coaching. So if you're interested in taking part in a program like this, fortunately, at the moment, it's only offered in a very small catchment. So I believe it's Dublin 5 and Dublin 13, but we are hoping to eventually expand this and offer it in other areas of the country. So just be on the lookout for that. But if you are interested, there's information on this you can access. So thanks very much, and hope that was all right.
Thank you so much, Amy. Now I please request all our panelists to switch on their cameras to go for the Q&A session. Thank you so much. As we go for our first question, the question is, can you help me understand CAT tax? If my parents send me money, as long as I stay below 80% of the Group A threshold, do I need to interact with revenue in any way? Do I need to prove the money I receive is in Group A? And I think there is a second part to this question which says, if I get about 80% of the threshold, I need to fill in some forms. The forms require disponer's PPSN, but my parents don't have a PPSN. They never lived in Ireland. Also, I'm not sure exactly how the total they gifted me over the years is calculated. Mary, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, thanks, Soumya, and thanks to the questioner. So this is really around gift tax, which comes under the same category as inheritance tax. So it's where you receive something, in this case, from your parents while they're still alive. So I'll just go through a few points. You can receive up to €3,000 a year and have no implication on tax. And oftentimes parents would give, say, €3,000 every calendar year, and that still retains the overall amount. Currently, you can receive €335,000 from your parents over your lifetime without having to pay gift tax or inheritance tax. If you receive anything aside from the €3,000, you are supposed to fill out a form for revenue. In terms of the PPS number, you suppose you could talk to revenue and see if it's required, but there is a provision for people who live outside of Ireland to get a PPS number where they're interacting with an agency such as revenue. And we can go through that with the individual questioner in relation to it. I mean, the question, I suppose, these are quite individual issues. The question around money they've given you for your education, if they paid an educational institution directly, no. But if they gave you money, yes. So it does depend on a whole lot of things. I would encourage that questioner to contact our local citizens information or Soumya. My email is mary.waters@sitinfo.ie. We might put that in the chat box, and if people have specific questions, they can email them and I'll allocate them to an information officer to call them back.
Perfect. Thanks, Mary. Answer this. What practical advice would you give to migrant parents specifically who have children who want to be exposed to financial literacy at a young age?
Amy, do you want to take that initially?
Sorry, can you, I actually didn't hear, didn't hear the very beginning of the question.
So I wanted to understand that we have a lot of migrant families and they start living in Ireland. So if they want to expose their children to financial literacy, what would be the best practical advice for that?
Sorry, I cut again. Am I
Sorry.
I hope it didn't do this my whole presentation.
No worries. No, you're okay. I wanted to understand if you have a practical advice for parents who want to expose their children to financial literacy.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I know that MABS is doing lots more programs in schools, which I think is great. They also have their own kind of money awareness week that they've been promoting. In general, I know there are some great tools on the likes of YouTube and in terms of just getting people started having conversations about money. From what we've seen or what I've seen on the more of a research end, the sooner you talk to young people and children about finances, the better that they will be later in life in terms of managing all of that. As someone who's also from outside Ireland and moved in, I have to say it's definitely a confusing context. So get any sort of resources and support that you can from the likes of MABS and Citizens Information, because, you know, it does get easier in time. And just to have those conversations with kids when they're young, especially now that we're moving, as Gwen was saying, towards contactless payments. So kids aren't seeing cash, they're not seeing bills being paid, you know, so all of that's being done in a very hidden way. It can be confusing with them when they get older in terms of, you know, how much does that cost? How much does it cost to, you know, heat my home and do all of these things? So yeah, have those conversations with them early. That would be my advice. And also maybe even, I think Gwen recommended something like this in her presentation, a small pocket allowance, you know, cash in hand, getting them to start, you know, assigning or thinking about these things quite early on. Don't know if you have anything to add to that, Gwen.
No, that was great. Thanks, Amy. I suppose I was looking more from an outside of MABS perspective first, because obviously we kind of will have a different approach. But I did mention giving children pocket money, but one of the things is, as Amy mentioned, that very often now we're no longer talking about bills or money at home. It was quite different when I was growing up. It was cash and bills coming in the post. So then you knew that things had to be paid. So there was a conversation. Where now, not just because we're digital and a little less cash, but also it's not talked about. Money is not talked about a lot. And I think it's because it has a bit of a negative thing, associated with talking about bills. But as Amy said, bills and debt are normal everyday life. You are in debt with a utility or an electricity bill the minute you receive it. You owe somebody money, but that's just normal life. So debt, and particularly in arrears or over indebted, it does, and all research indicates it has a lot of shame associated with it, a lot of guilt, a lot of embarrassment. And from that, then we do see that parents are less confident to talk to their children about money. But it is the best thing that we can do, is have a conversation. It's not about scaring them. You don't want them to be getting upset about bills, but it's just that they understand that a house costs money, bills cost money. So MABS, we do have a calendar, and it is to support the budgeting from January to December that I spoke of. But on the calendar, there are small little stickers, kind of like the pictures that I had on the presentation, that parents can leave this calendar in the house, and you put a picture of a light bulb. And then the children will get used to, well, that means there's an electricity bill due, or a picture of children going back to school on certain months. So that's showing then, oh, the school cost has to be paid for. So financial literacy is really, it is about confidence and understanding the financial system. I think maybe exposing them to Mary's presentation on tax might be a little too far just yet, but it depends on the age of the children, I suppose, that I'm thinking. But yes, it is the best thing that parents can do, is to be open with children about money, but also that little pocket money, and helping them save. If they can open an account, children can open accounts in appropriate accounts, saving accounts. So if they could even learn to save 50 cents or €1 a week, but they're learning. So does that answer the question, I wonder, for the participant?
Yeah, perfect.
Great.
There's a follow-up question which says, I paid pension every month. I heard if I leave Ireland as a migrant, I can apply it back. Could you please tell me more about it? If people become Irish, is it the same procedure? If any of you would like to answer that question.
Yeah, I'll take that one to start with, Sumia. So again, it depends on the specifics of the individual, and if it's an occupational pension, as in they're paying into an occupation scheme with their employer, there are generally rules. If you're in it less than 2 years, you can get your contributions back. Generally speaking, if it's over 2 years, you can't, but it does depend on the terms of the occupational pension scheme, and they would apply for those who are paying into that pension scheme, regardless of their nationality or citizenship. In terms of social welfare, generally speaking, once you've paid your PRSI, which goes towards your pension as such, it's there, but there is transferability of social insurance payments out of Ireland and into Ireland as well. So sometimes when someone goes to apply for pension, we'd look at their contributions into the social insurance system in their native country as well. Apologies to Lisa, I think I was flying on that answer. So again, if that individual wishes to contact me, I'll get someone to speak to them specifically about the terms of their specific pension scheme. What I would say to people is that in occupational pension schemes, people often don't look at the small print or the terms and conditions of that scheme. And we would encourage people to make sure that they do. And generally speaking, there are online portals, another online account where you can look up what you have in that pension scheme and what the terms and conditions of it are.
Thanks, Mary. Another thing that I have noticed while we work with migrant community is that they face a lot of problems opening a bank account. And if any of you would like to address that, and what is the best practices, what can they do, what are the alternatives? Because we do have a lot of, especially women who are coming as dependents, they do face that problem of opening a bank account. If you would like to please shed some light on that.
I'll start that. Amy, you probably come in behind me, maybe. The CCPC website that myself and Amy spoke about has all the information, and the Citizens Information website has information about what people need to open a bank account. So if you open a bank account online, you need what's called 2+. So it's a photo ID, 2 photo IDs and a proof of address. If you open it in a bank, you need 1 photo ID and proof of address. And the ID has to be in date, and the proof of address has to be within the last 3 months or 6 months, depending on whether you're opening it online or in the bank. With banks in pre-COVID, but certainly during 2020-21, you do have to make an appointment to open a bank account if you want to do it in person. If you want to do it online, you can go on to CCPC, have a look, see what bank suits you best in bank charges and the services that they offer. And then you could try and open online to see the photo ID and the proof of address that are required. I appreciate that maybe sometimes people may not have a payment or a bill coming in their name, maybe if they're dependents. And the local Gardaí can assist with that in what's called an ML10 form, which is verification that the Garda has met you, that they have looked at all your paperwork, and that they can verify that that's your address, even if it's not, like with a social welfare claim. If somebody is a dependent and their partner is on the social welfare or receiving a social welfare payment, the woman might be named on the claim as a dependent adult, and then they may not be, though. So it is tricky sometimes to get some proof of address, but I would definitely maybe try with the guards to see if there is if the Gardaí could do what's called the ML10 form. And I'm not too sure whether Amy or Mary might have any other ideas on the proof of address.
I was interested to know what some of their challenges are, because I would guess it might be the proof of address in terms of how to open, like Gwen was saying. And in addition to the form from the Gardaí, the ML10, there's also, if they are registered with immigration, with GNIB, that letter can also prove, because it's now a letter that's sent, it can prove as a proof of address as well. In addition, if they don't have that bill, that was something I was going to add to that.
And I suppose a specific issue that's come up is that some people can't prove their address, particularly if they're in homeless accommodation or in temporary accommodation, such as hotels and so on. And that would apply across the board, regardless of whether they are obviously migrants or not. So that's very, very challenging for people. And we would have worked with specific banks in relation to that, and also with local authorities, particularly where the lease is perhaps in the name of the local authority, or they're paying the bill rather than the individual themselves.
Thank you. This is specifically something that I wanted to address, but if anyone has a question regarding that, please feel free to reach out to us, and we might be able to work on your individual case regarding the problem that you're facing, especially with opening a bank account. Gwen, do you want to come in there?
Yes, if that's okay. One of the one of the objectives, the aims of MABS that I mentioned, is that we would look to gather information about social policy or policy issues, and this would be one of them. So if somebody, and indeed citizens information where Mary is working, they will also be gathering social policy issues like this. So if somebody is experiencing this difficulty, they might reach out to one or the other service. We might be able to direct them in particular to particular areas that might be able to support them, as Mary had mentioned, talking to a bank. But for ourselves, it would be really good that we can see the specific issues that our different communities are experiencing in access to banking or any financial services.
Thanks, Gwen. Adding to that, as Gwen mentioned, that even New Communities Partnership help you go through that entire process. So if you want, or if you're facing any kind of problems, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you. And we are happy to even co-refer each other according to the situation. So this is, I know, a problem that a lot of migrants face, and I wanted to address this issue during the webinar. So thank you so much. I am wary of the time, but going to my last question that I wanted to touch upon is, for the medical expenses tax, is anyone with a full-time job eligible for this? And how exactly does this work? And does this apply for a person who's on a part-time job? And Mary, I guess you would want to answer that.
Yeah, so it's not about what your working status is, it's about if you're paying tax. So if you're paying tax, you can reduce your tax bill by claiming tax relief in your medical expenses. So it doesn't matter if you're working part-time or full-time, it's just so long as you're paying tax. It might be even someone has a pension, but are paying tax. That's the key piece. The easiest way to do it is through your My Account. And I know from personal experience, having uploaded a medical expenses claim form on My Account, the money was in my bank account in 6 days. So that's a really good turnaround. You can also do paper forms, but they take longer. The key thing about medical expenses is that you're not required to submit the receipts, but you must hold on to them because they could come looking. And that's a very important point. There is millions of unclaimed medical expenses sitting in the state's bank accounts, and you can go back 4 years in terms of claiming for up to 4 years backwards. Again, it's something that ourselves can help you in. I think it's something that MABS would flag in terms of the medical expenses. We would say to people, you can also ask your GP and your pharmacist or your chemist for a printout of all you have paid them I understand they go back at least 4 years, but certainly the last year. And you can use those statements as the basis for which you submit your medical expenses. So I hope that's clear.
Thank you so much, Mary. If you have any further query or need support, please get in touch with us. We will be circulating these presentations used by the speakers today, as well as any relevant contacts details shortly after the webinar. I want to thank once again everyone who was able to join us today. Especially thanks to Gwen, Mary, and Amy for sharing their valuable time and knowledge with us. The ISL interpreters, Ray and Lisa, for their hard work. The MyVows outreach and support worker, Laura, who has been working behind the scenes. My colleague, Francesco, co-organizer of this session, and all our partners and service providers who are striving every day for a fair and equal treatment and social justice for migrant people in Ireland. Thank you all once again. Have a really good day and stay safe.